usually those huge right tackles are not the most athletic guys. And all throughout the offseason, we keep hearing about, how much they want their offensive linemen to get out and move. So this one where I talked about Armand Watts as a guy that Andre Patterson really liked, this is a guy that Rick Dennison, their new offensive line coach, really liked. And so I think that this is one of those picks where the Vikings are trusting their assistant coaches, their position coaches, in a lot of the evaluation. And so, it's a Kubiak, Dennison type of guy, but I think he's pretty raw at this point. I think it's going to be a year or two before he can really start to make an impression and get a push for a starting job. So to me, he's almost strictly going to have to be a right tackle, and that may hurt him. However, as he gets into the system, continues to get used to a body that used to be up to 380 pounds heavy and is now down to about 330 pounds. Maybe he can start to get a little quicker feet, get some better movement, more athleticism, and get stronger. So I think this is a developmental pick that's going to be a good follow during the offseason as well.
For a team that struggled to find a third receiver, is Dylan Mitchell a potential help this year, or is he more of a project?
I think he's a guy who could see spot duty this year, depending on how quickly he gets used to the offense. He does look like he's a fast guy, can separate a bit coming out of his routes, so that's always a big positive. To me, the one day I saw of him at rookie minicamp, he dropped one pass, and so you go, okay, these guys are kind of swimming a little bit. I'm sure he dropped more than that, but I saw him drop one pass that he should have had. So I think it's how quickly can he get comfortable just being around a new team, around a new system, and if he looks like he's really making progress in mini camps, in training camp, then he may see a bit of spot duty here and there. And he's also a guy that I think will be interesting to watch and see if he can potentially become a kickoff returner, because with Mike Hughes coming off of that knee injury, I'd be a little surprised if they're willing to put him out there right away as a kick return guy. So I think that's one area where Dylan Mitchell could make an impression as a rookie.
And let's get to the cornerback and Zimmer's thoughts on the camp. I do want to thank Tony Hoaglund, Hoaglund, your State Farm agent from Champlin, handles my insurance, handles Michael Russo's insurance. And as I always say with Twill, too, we're not getting a discount. We're just using his services because he's really good at what he does.
Hey, Minnesota sports fans. This is your local State Farm agent, Tony Hoaglund. I need you all to ask yourselves this question. If you're in an at-fault car accident and you are sued for $700,000, how much of that $700,000 will my current insurance company pay? If you are unsure or can't answer all $700,000, you need to give us a call. State Farm has been number one in car insurance since World War II and number one in homeowners insurance since 1964. For a no-obligation review of your current policies, call us at 763-421-4900 or check out our website at www.champlininsurance.com.
All right, what do you see in Kris Boyd? Is this a Zimmer pet project?
Yes, I really think that's true. He is a little bit like Holton Hill. First of all, played with Holton Hill, knows him, was friends with him at Texas. So there's some familiarity there. But, he is a bigger, kind of stockier cornerback, not necessarily that tall, but to me, he seems like, because he's has good muscle to him, and watching some of his tape at Texas, he played off the ball quite a bit, but he also was up in press coverage. And I think that this is the sort of guy that Zimmer will look at and say, I want him to be near the line of scrimmage. I want him to be used to and often chucking receivers. And I might see even the potential for him to become a slot cornerback, because he is really aggressive when he comes on a blitz. And so that's one thing I saw at Texas that I really liked about him is when he is asked to come on a blitz, he fully commits to it and goes right after it. And so I think, whereas he's not Captain Munnerlyn small by any means. He's got several inches on what Captain Munnerlyn had, but he is muscular that way. He's strong, and I think he's physical enough that eventually, depending on what happens with Mackenzie Alexander after this season going into a contract year, maybe Kris Boyd is a guy that they look to start to get used to that slot cornerback area, and I think he's got the potential to eventually work himself into that role.
Reminder, our network has grown just exponentially. This show is one of the most popular on an ever-growing network, and we do thrive, and we're able to grow this thing because of our sponsors. If you'd like to sponsor this program, reach a very large and growing audience, you can reach us at TalkNorthPodcast@gmail.com. Thanks also to our producer, Brandon Morton. So Jake Browning and Marshawn Diggs. One is of interest because he's a quarterback. The other is of interest because his brother is a very good player. Did either of them make an impression on you?
Yeah, I thought Jake Browning looked fairly comfortable out there, and he looks like a guy that should fit in. And you look at what he did in high school. I mean, he was one of these All-American guys, one of the most highly recruited and sought after high school players, set all kinds of records at California for the state of California in his passing prowess there. Went to Washington and had just a massive sophomore season where he threw 43 touchdowns and I think it was like 15 interceptions. So he had a great year then. But then he ran into some shoulder injuries. He lost his speedy receiver, John Ross, to the NFL. And he kind of came back and just had so-so junior and senior seasons. But when you see him in his first rookie minicamp in the pros, he kind of looks like he fits, like he's comfortable. And so I think he is a guy that might potentially push a Sean Mannion or a Kyle Sloter for a backup job. Now, whether that's the number 3 job or the number 2 job, that remains to be seen. But I think if he can get really comfortable with this offense in a hurry, that he's got some potential for them. Not the strongest arm, but I think he makes pretty good decisions when he was under pressure in Washington. I saw some really stupid decisions as well. So he's got to eliminate those and know when to take a sack instead of just throwing up the ball and hoping to get rid of it. So I think there's things to work with in him. And one thing that I liked in talking to him on Friday, he was saying that it's great to be done with school. So this is all that you have to concentrate on. And he raved about the facilities here and how easy it will be to come in and watch film all day long. And so I think if you hear that from a quarterback, that's a really good first sign of this guy is committed to it. He wants to improve. He wants to get better. And he seems really down to earth. Like he knows that there were some ups and downs in his college career, but I think he believes if he gets comfortable in a system and used to the players around him, that he can take the steps that are needed to eventually compete for a roster spot.
That's a fascinating development for a franchise that just so rarely, develops its own quarterbacks, its own starting quarterbacks. They got to come through with a sleeper at some point, you would think. What was Zimmer's mood, and did he say anything that jumped out at you?
Yeah, I mean, he seems pretty excited about where the season is, and I think part of that has to do with the changes in the offensive coaching staff. He, to me, seems like he has so much more trust and confidence in what is building with this offense. I think part of it has to do with just meshing more philosophically with Kevin Stefanski, Gary Kubiak, what Rick Dennison wants. And I think the fact that he has a guy like Dennison who has been in Kubiak's system a lot and is familiar with it. To me, when it comes to defense, Zimmer seems to know exactly the type of player that he wants. When it comes to offense, I'm not so sure over the past few years that, things have changed so much. They've had so many different coordinators, and I don't think there's really been a great trust with his coordinator or some of the position coaches when it comes to evaluating exactly what they want. with Dennison, it may not be as strong as it was with Tony Sperano in like fully trusting what's out there and how that guy transfers to the Viking system. But I think it's building to get to that point where Dennison sees a guy and he says, here are the qualities I like about this offensive lineman. Let's go get that guy. And I think Zimmer was willing to do that in this draft. And it seems to be, creating some excitement for him that maybe there are some games this year where the defense isn't playing all that well, but the offense can make up for it. So I think that's something for people to be excited about who love the Vikings, where they can see, okay, we know the defense should be pretty good. Most of the starters are returning, 10 of the 11 starters returning. But what about that offense? And it's still going to be dictated much by the offensive line play, but they finally started to do something about it with more than just, one pick in the second round with Brian O'Neill last year. Now it's been Garrett Bradbury in the first round, Drew Samia in the fourth round, Josh Klein in free agency. And, if Pat Elflein, my assumption, and I would be very, very surprised if Bradbury is not the starting center. And so I think Elflein is going to have to bump out to guard. And if he can rebound a little bit from what I thought wasn't the greatest 2018 for him, then I think their offensive line is on the right path and should be much improved. I don't think they're going to be fully where they need to be or where they want to be, but they've started to address it. And I think they're making good progress in addressing it. And so give them this year, give them next year, maybe another pick or two. And I think that offensive line can become a strength for the Vikings rather than oh, great, here we go again type of position.
Let's ask Tim about the Vikings checking out the kicking coach position. Let's get a final thought from Tim. Again, thanks to Twill Galleria, twillmn.com, also TWILL on Instagram. Tony Hoaglund, your State Farm agent in Champlin, HOAGLUND, and BiteSquad.com, promo code TALKNORTH for your first delivery free. What's going on with the kicking coach position?
Yeah, Zimmer was asked about that on Friday and said, they are working on it. And it sounds like they have a guy in mind. He's not naming that guy yet. But, if that, to me, it seems like they may have a candidate or two that they're really going after. And if that doesn't happen, they're not just going to bring in anybody to be the kicking coach. And so I don't know. I find it kind of intriguing and ironic that now all of a sudden that's such a priority for them. And it comes at a time where you have Dan Bailey, who's a veteran. And to me, I'm going to be really curious to see how a guy like Bailey responds to having a kicking coach. Now, I think he's open to having it, but you got to find the guy that meshes very well with the personality of your kicker. And so, I mean, I'm just surprised that they're doing this when they have a veteran kicker versus, when Blair Walsh was going through all his struggles or Daniel Carlson was struggling early last year and in the off season as well. So I don't know how it's all going to turn out. They may or may not end up with a kicking coach. If they do, they should get one in here pretty quickly so that he can start working throughout all the OTAs and mini camps in the off season with this guy.
Interesting. Let's get a final thought from Tim. Thanks to all of our listeners. Check out TalkNorth.com for all of our shows, and check out TalkNorth.com or our Twitter feeds or whatever else for the Jeff Diamond Vikings and NFL Insider. Nice companion piece to this show. The show, a very hardworking beat writer who has known the organization since the 90s. A columnist who's known the organization since 1990. The Jeff Diamond Show is different. It's a view from the executive office, someone who was the NFL Executive of the Year when he ran the Vikings and also took the Tennessee Titans to the Super Bowl. So check out that show as well. Final thought, Tim.
Well, I think I mentioned, probably back in January or February where Mike Zimmer had talked about it seems like he has spent a lot of time early in this offseason evaluating what he does and how he approaches players. And what I've learned in the last few weeks is when they are talking to draft prospects,